Here with Christopher again, talking about the Book of the Dead. And we were talking about how we hadn't really done an introductory video on the Book of the Dead. Christopher, could you show them the...
Yes, I can. This is the American Book of the Dead, written by E.J. Gold. He's a somewhat enigmatic figure. I have not been able to find out much about him. All I know about him is that he is an artist. He wrote the American Book of the Dead, and his father may or may not have been H.L. Gold, who a science fiction editor for Galaxy Science Fiction, but it's very enigmatic. I can't find much information.
Yeah, EJ has done a lot to keep himself in the background because he has not wanted to. In his group, he's very active, but he has a lot of layers to his work, and in many ways he considers himself more of an artist than anything else, than a spiritual teacher. So, but the Book of the Dead has gone through many different forms. EJ definitely evolved it. He took the Tibetan mythology out of it and made it accessible. And what I mean by that is that in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, when the guides appear, the Tibetan Book of the Dead refers to those guides as very specific names with very specific forms. And these names and forms don't have any direct relevance to us, and EJ took that out. And when a guide appears, what in the Tibetan Book of the Dead they call the Bodhisattva, EJ just calls it the guide. And so it's very elastic and keeps it open for a number of different ways of being interpreted.
So, in the original Book of the Dead, the guides are always referred to as bodhisattvas?
In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, not the Egyptian Book of the Dead.
Not in the Egyptian.
Yeah, in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, they're called gods. They're referred to as gods.
Do you think you could give us an introduction to what the Book of the Dead is, spanning all those different books of the dead?
Generally speaking, it's a description of the space, the after-death space. The Tibetans were the ones that evolved it to the point where they actually saw that it was something that was cyclical and happening all the time.
While the Egyptians treated it more like a ladder.
And a one-time thing. You only certain schools of Egyptian thought you take rebirth in this world. You usually take rebirth in higher worlds if you know how to get there. If not, you're kind of screwed.
And that's why they had such elaborate rituals around death, correct?
Yeah, exactly. That the soul has to find its proper resting place or it is problematic. It can cause all kinds of problems. Ghosts, hauntings, unrest, and turmoil.
And is that the reason why so much effort was put into the Pharaoh's journey to the afterlife?
Yeah, although a lot of that, they're very enigmatic, but it was a hierarchical structure, so the pharaohs had access to things that normal people did not have access to. But at one point, the Egyptian Book of the Dead was a major industry, and every household had a copy of the Book of the Dead.
And about every household, too, was going through elaborate rituals burying their dead. I remember reading about that.
Yes, yeah, it became a huge industry. It was a very, very big thing. The Tibetans also have very elaborate rituals, but it's more about the dying process. And then after the Voyager dies, they are very important to leave the person, the corpse, for 3 days and not move it. But that's something we can't do. We don't do that at all in our culture.
And why is that considered important in the Tibetan culture?
Because the Voyager can be still in the body, and before the Voyager leaves, that point is a very, very lucid, important point, not to force the Voyager out of the body.
I see, and that's because even E.J. Gold mentions the importance of leaving the body, but he does say that in this culture it's very difficult to get them to do that.
Right. Yeah, it is. You have to make very unique arrangements for that. But if the Voyager, you can encourage the Voyager to leave the body, but that is something that really there's no control over. But if you move the body, it usually right there, that will make the Voyager leave. The Book of the Dead evolves and changes within every culture that it comes into. So it's a constantly changing book.
So basically the Book of the Dead is a book describing the spaces you find yourself in during the dying process and after death, But because that space also includes all of what we consider life, the book extends far beyond just death.
Yes, it's more applicable now than it is to death, but right, in most cultures didn't see it that way. They saw it as something that in afterlife. The Tibetans were the first ones to see that it applies right now.
Cyclical nature of it.
And EJ took it to another level, more on a psychological and how it applies right now.
It's very much a book that's meant to be used. It has a specific sequence of readings. It's that process.
It is. It's very, very much. It's a text. It's a tech manual of the mind. Really, it is designed to be used and designed to be understood. And it's a constant process. Your understanding changes as you go on.
It's not just a passive book you read and think, oh, I've had an insight. It's more of a practice.
Yeah.
Something that you can apply to help the Voyager outside the body, to train the Voyager while we're still inside the body, to deal with what we will be dealing with outside the body.
Yeah, well, yeah, when you're dead, there is no inside or outside. You're only in the mind. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like us and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to be notified for when we post new videos. We really would encourage you to ask any questions that you have. We would love to answer them and address them in any way possible. And we will talk to you soon. And remember, stay focused on the question.